If we told you that you could take a outdated, disgusting, borderline gross bathroom and turn it into a beautiful one without having to go backwards, without having to do any demo, would you be interested? Well, I hope so, because we made a whole video about it and we're about to explain how we did it. So as you can see here, the old existing travertine countertop had a massive crack. Actually, the whole thing was split. But rather than replace the whole thing, we used a company called Smartcret Microcement to resurface and refinish the whole thing without having to replace it at all. Now, in order to do that, the first thing you have to do is cover the entire thing with a smart primer. And this is one of the things that they provide in the kit that you would get when you buy Smartcret. But the first step is to prime the entire surface so that the following coats have a suitable substrate to bond to. Don't skip this step. Take your time, make sure you prime the whole thing. And once it's cured, once it's dry, you're going to apply the Smart Base. This is the most sort of cementitious product that comes with the kit. And it's sort of a thicker, more coarse aggregate that you apply over the entire countertop, including the edges and the inside lip of the sink. Basically anything that you're going to see, you want to cover in this base, and you want the base coat to be thick enough that you can buff it and sand it and not expose the underlying substrate. And while the first coat of the Smart Base was drying on the countertop, we switched gears and started doing the floor, which we also wanted to be microcement instead of this old, dated, and kind of ugly tile. So after priming that surface, letting that dry, we used what's called a Smart Jointer to fill in all the grout joints. This product acts as a filler so that when we go to apply our first base coat, you won't see any of the dips where the tile dips and the grout joints begin. This basically gives you a fresh canvas to put your base coat on. And once we've given that a chance to dry and set up, it's back to the countertop to sand down any high spots or impurities or basically any rough spots you're going to hit with some sandpaper to make sure that your next coat goes on smoothly. This step doesn't have to be perfect. You will get the hang of it as you go, as you're going to be sanding between every single coat. You're just basically making sure the next step is easier by getting rid of anything that's going to be catastrophic. And at this point, we're going to do the same thing with the floor, with the joint filler. And at this point, it's time for coat 2 of base coat on the countertop. And all we're doing here is trying to make sure that we have enough of that base on the countertop so that it's nice and strong, and if we have to sand anything down, that there's going to be something underneath it. And we're doing the exact same process on the floor, giving it a few base coats before we put our top coat on there. And at this point, we shifted our attention to the rest of the vanity. Now, this vanity was a wood veneer, and we knew that we would be painting it to match the microcement better. So first step in that is always to sand, give a good scuff sand, and then hit it with a high adhesion primer. In this case, we went with sticks because it's worked well for us in the past. And at that point, and again, this is gonna happen a lot, we were back to sanding. So after every coat of the Smartcret, of the microcement process, you're sanding in between. And once you get that buffed out, it's time for the Smart Liso. And now this is the creamier, more satisfying texture of the Smartcret that's gonna give you that sort of smooth and polished look that you see with a lot of microcements, especially when they're sealed. It looks a lot better than the sort of rough and coarse base. So the first coat goes on and it'll fill a lot of those impurities, a lot of those dips. The first coat will take care of that, but don't try to fill everything in one coat. Let that set up, and while you're letting that set up, it's a good time to throw a coat of paint on. So we're painting the vanity with just a regular water-based cabinet paint. We use Advanced by Benjamin Moore, but you use whatever you want. And wouldn't you know it, we're sanding again. This might be a good time to tell you to invest in a good sander, because there is a lot of sanding between coats, and that's gonna make the difference between a good application and a sloppy one. So take your time sanding, and it will pay dividends later. And while you've got the sander out, you might as well use that time to fill and sand any imperfections in the wall, because you're going to be painting that too. Actually, you're going to be painting everything in this bathroom, including the tub and tile. That's right, you heard that correctly. We're not taking anything out, we're just gonna go with a facelift for this entire bathroom. So we're gonna remove all the fixtures, all the hardware, and anything that's gonna get in the way of putting a new coat of paint on. Now that's gonna include removing all the silicone and giving the tub and tile a thorough cleaning so that the paint has something to adhere to. That's vital. We even at this point chose to seal the corners again with the caulking this time so that it's paintable. But you can't just use any paint if you're gonna be painting your tub and tile. You gotta use a specific paint designed for that specific purpose, and that's why we went with Rust-Oleum's 2-part stinky, sting the eyes concoction that's designed for this exact application. So it's going to give us the best chance for longevity. Now I know what you're thinking, can you really just paint tile? Will it last? Well, actually, yeah, it will. You do have to be a little bit delicate. It's not like a brand new tile, but again, let's keep in mind that we're not replacing anything, we're just doing a facelift. So for the investment, this is the best bang for your buck change that you're gonna get outside of a tub fitter or something like that. And the best part is, if it does scratch, it couldn't be an easier fix. It's a paint job, not a retiling, regrouting job. And we like that. We also like new shower hardware and new cabinet knobs that are an ode to the old existing travertine countertop that's still under there, but no one would know that when we're done. Now the faucet we chose here was a 3-hole setup rather than a 1, so we had to add some new holes, and while we were doing that, we figured, hey, let's upgrade the sconces as well, because if you're gonna do something, you might as well do all of it, right? Right? You're still with me, right? You're still here? Good, you're following along? It's not that complicated. Now a new mirror goes a long way, and with every new fixture, every new piece of hardware that goes on the wall, you'll notice the room is looking 1,000 times better than it did before, and that will continue the more things you add. But we're not quite done yet. We still have some painting to do, and the countertop actually needs a few more coats of that Smart Liso. So that's exactly what we're doing here. And now what you'll find is with every coat, it gets a little bit smoother and a little bit more perfect. So if you really are going for that perfect, smooth, glassy finish, it may take you a few coats, or if you're an experienced micro cementer or great with a trowel, you may be able to do it faster. But for us, the same thing as the floor that happened on the countertop, we put several coats of the Liso to get it as smooth as we wanted it, and continued to sand away any imperfections that we saw. And that's one of the benefits of this product, is if you don't like something, you can sand it down and apply another coat, or just leave it as it is. But this is the sort of fine tuning that makes the job look personal and perfect if you do it right. So take your time and make it just the way you want it, because this product allows you to do just that. So keep sanding, apply more coats if you need to, but once you have it looking the way you want it, it's time to seal it and make it permanent and waterproof. And to do that, we're not only using the Smart Varnish, but we're going to add a Smart Booster. This makes it a little bit harder and a little bit more durable, and in a bathroom like this, we figured it couldn't hurt, especially consider the one underneath it was cracked. So we apply that to the countertop, and then with a fine nap roller, we're going to spread that evenly over the countertop. And because this is getting several coats, it's not a bad idea to keep this thorough but relatively thin. You don't want to glob on too much. And in between coats, once it's dried, you're going to sand it down using a very high grit sandpaper as to not take off too much of that sealer, but to make sure that it's glassy smooth. Blow a kiss to your fans, and before you know it, you're applying another coat. Once that dries up, guess what? You're done. It's completely done. A brand new bathroom facelift that looks like a completely different room. You would have no idea that this was the same bathroom that you started in, except for maybe those hints, those odes to the travertine. I mean, look at this thing. Do you remember how this used to look? Look at it now. Completely different bathroom with zero demo. No backwards, only forwards. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to call Dan at Oh, you don't want me to give out your phone number?
No.
All right. Just hit us in the comments. We'll try to answer as many as we can.